Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Morning, Nikki. How are you?
Morning. Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, there she is, the lady of the hour.
Hello.
So we are going to do a little bit of a different arrangement here. I came down with something. I don't know what it is, whether it's COVID but I don't want to be hacking and coughing and sneezing and stuff like that while this is going on. So Avril is going to be doing the main part of the conversation with you.
Okay.
So just to give everybody a good understanding of what we're going to do is just for housekeeping, this is going to be recorded and then we're going to put it on Twitter Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. And then we're going to make sure that that is all put out on the internet later today. So our plan was to have it right now, but one of our colleagues that normally does the recording while we do this, she is off today with her daughter while she's doing her 16th sweet 16 birthday.
Nice.
So I'm glad that she's able to do that. So Avril, I'll just go ahead and quickly introduce myself. My name is Kevin Dawson. I'm the co-founder of Coffee with Democrats. Started in Oklahoma. You know Alicia Andrews, the chair here. She and I are close friends, and so I'm really excited about having the opportunity to speak with you and get to know you a little bit better. We do have a very nice set of questions that we're going to ask you today, and we're real excited about having you on to be able to address some of these questions. And but Avril is going to be the host today, and I'm just going to kind of mute my. I'm going to mute, and then I'm going to ask if you can hear me. And if you guys don't say that you can hear me, then I'm going to stay where I'm at. Just stay off and let Avril take the lead. So,
Okay.
Avril, you've got the questions and everything in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes, I do have them.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you, Nikki, for coming on to Coffee with Democrats. And Avril is also a Florida resident.
Oh,
Yes,
very
she lives in
nice.
Orlando, and
Okay.
I'll let her give a little small biography about herself while I mute myself. So thank you again for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for joining us this morning. And yes, I am a native Floridian, and I live in the Orlando area.
It's in Orlando? Family and everything in Orlando?
I'm from originally Daytona Beach.
Okay.
And then I moved here as an adult, and I work here as a nurse. And I've been just trying to get more active with our, county party and everything here. So then I ended up kind of getting involved with Coffee with Democrats. And I think it's a great, organization to be able to discuss with different politicians and kind of, get the messages out there.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah. I'm just going to do a little introduction of you, unless you would like to do it.
Go for it.
Oh, okay. So I have that you are an American lawyer and politician who's serving as the chair of the Florida Democratic Party. And prior to your election, you served as the 12th Florida Commissioner of Agriculture from 2019 to 2023. And you're have been a member of the Democratic Party, and you graduated from University of Florida in 2003. And you previously practiced various forms of law, including corporate law, foreclosure defense, and public defense. And that you were also one of 17 speakers to jointly deliver the keynote address at the 2020 Democratic National Convention. Can I ask what made you decide to go for the role that you're in now?
It wasn't an easy decision. I had just been 4 years as Commissioner of Agriculture, member of the Florida Cabinet, the only statewide elected Democrat, was the only one who was able to cross the finish line in 2018. Spent 4 years serving right next to Ron DeSantis and was the antagonist every single day, standing up for Floridians, standing up against his policies, calling him out. And when I got done being commissioner, I sat back for a couple of weeks trying to figure out what my next path is. And more so because I'm somebody who has always wanted to give, to make changes, to stand up for people that don't always have the seat at the table. And so I was trying to figure out where I can then take that passion when I was done being commissioner and what to do with it. And I sat for the first couple of weeks of 2023, and I was watching bill after bill after bill after bill get filed. And knowing that we are in a super minority, the first time that there hasn't been a statewide elected Democrat since Reconstruction, that we have a super minority in both chambers. And so knew that there was no way that we were going to stop any of these pieces of legislation until which time that we get more Democrats into office. And so I sat there and I got more and more frustrated. And the bill that kind of broke the camel's back to get me to run for this was when they filed HB 999, which is the one that went after diversity, equity, and inclusion in our higher education system. One of the things that you also didn't, added into my bio. I went to the University of Florida for 3 degrees. I have an undergrad, a master's, and a law degree, and I was student body president my last year at UF. So this is something that was so important to me to make sure that higher education, that there was diversity both in the classroom and outside the classroom. I would not be sitting here today. And so if not for all that educational opportunities. And that was it. And I said, I can't sit back. I've got to make sure that my passion is put into a place where we can fix the party infrastructure, and that we can make sure that we're creating balance back into the state of Florida, because unfortunately in our state, there's no democracy today. And knowing that the only way that we're going to get democracy back is when we have 2 strong parties in our state. And so that's what ultimately led to my decision to take on this huge responsibility. People kept saying to me, I don't really understand. You're jumping onto the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. Got it. And I said, I'm always up for good challenges, and my state and our country are worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And I can speak as a Floridian. We are very happy to have you advocating for us here. So can you talk about when you first got into the role that you're in now? You did end up getting arrested at a protest. So can you talk about the story with that and how you felt about it?
Yeah, for those who don't know, Florida, unfortunately, not only has passed a 15-week abortion ban last year, but it wasn't far enough for Ron DeSantis and his hunt to be president of the United States. That he had to go one step further the next legislative session by passing a 6-week abortion ban. We all know this is an ultimate ban completely on reproductive health care. And already hearing the stories from the 15-week abortion ban of women dying, having forced into situations where they're putting their own lives on the line. We're hearing those stories, and 6 weeks is just going to be heartbreaking stories that are going to come out of Florida and the entire South. And knew that I had to do whatever was possible. And so there was an organization called Occupy Tallahassee who had been working on organizing an event in Tallahassee to occupy and to make sure that this piece of legislation wasn't going to just get passed without a resilient fight back from women and from supporters in our state. And so I was asked to kind of participate and to help, and there was going to be a rally and a protest on Monday evening. I was called about 4 or 5 o'clock and said, hey, what time are you coming down here? And I said, probably within an hour or so. And they said, well, can you come sooner than later? There's already police officers here. And I said, why are there police officers? You guys are just, peacefully protesting. And they said, can you just come down? And so I came down and I quickly threw on now my very famous t-shirt with, okay, I'm going down and I'm going to go and I'm going to stand united with all these incredible fighters, and got down there. and saw that there was 18 law enforcement officers in riot gear that had already been lined up inside of City Hall. And around 7:15, the minority leader, Lauren Book, as well as some other senators, had come out of the chambers and they started doing a press conference. And at this point, we had already been told that if you stood on the other side of the barricades after sunset, that is something that they had just put into place 3 days earlier outside of City Hall, calling it a park, and that it was only open sunrise to sunset. That was just done literally 3 days prior to this protest, knowing that what was happening. And they had threatened to arrest everybody. And I said, there's no way. This is outside of City Hall in Tallahassee. There's about 30 of us that are out here, peaceful. No one is walking by. There's no businesses that are open that are interrupting. No one even knows that we're here, to be quite honest. But unfortunately, we got done with our press conference and we sat down on the other side of the barricades. There was 13 of us at the time, 13 women sitting on the ground, holding hands, singing Lean on Me. And at 8 o'clock, the law enforcement officers came down the stairs of City Hall. And they came, and two of the women, there was also a younger woman that was sitting with us who had gotten up because, of course, we didn't want her getting arrested. And they came and they arrested 11 of us from Occupy Tallahassee, as well as myself and the minority leader. And we got booked in, but I would do it every day, standing up. And sometimes, as John Lewis says, good trouble, and sometimes good trouble is necessary trouble. And it really showed a new face of what the Florida Democratic Party is going to do. And that is stand up and fight back and be strong and be resilient and say that we are not going to bend to the oppression of the Republican Party in our state. So that's kind of the story. It was not intended for me to be arrested that night. But if I knew, that this was going to have such an impact, it wouldn't have even been a second thought, which it wasn't.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think that ended up really highlighting the issue even more, and that's kind of what it's all about is, standing up for what you believe in and getting the issue out there, getting more awareness out in the public. Because I know there's a lot of people that don't really pay attention to what's going on.
And I think that the other thing that we were really, that Lauren and I had an opportunity, we had 3 hours in jail by ourselves to talk about kind of the state of the state. And so one of the things that we were even talking about is, that here we are, two Jewish women, two white women, that were standing up for all women, and that we had an opportunity to show that if we are willing to stand up to get ourselves arrested and to show that we are ready to be in this fight, that hopefully it inspires others who may feel that there is no hope, that there's no one fighting for them, that they have to just kind of turn off the TV and just go to sleep, that there is a path to activism, that there is a path, that there are strong women that are going to stand up for everybody, regardless of your race, regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of your background, your economic status, that we're going to continue to be in this fight. And so it was so important that we were there showing the fight, and that come with us and be part of this, because we can't do it alone, but we certainly are willing to take the lead.
Absolutely. Can you talk about the Democratic National Committee's deficiencies in the prior election cycles? Like what you think the issues were?
I think there was a lot of issues, and I have been very upfront and very blunt about what was before when I got here. And unfortunately, it was a combination of so many things. In 2018, when I was the only one who won that year, and we lost Andrew Gillum and we lost Senator Nelson, the Democrats took their ball and went home. And instead of recognizing like, oh my God, we just want a cabinet position that we haven't won in decades, somebody who wants to work with us and lift up the Democratic ideals, they took their ball and went home and felt defeated. And so there was a lack of like energy inside of the party apparatus to even get ready for 2020. We hadn't been doing voter registration inside the party. We hadn't been really lifting up our grassroots organizations. We hadn't been doing a good enough job recruiting of candidates. And so when it came to the pandemic, we even shut down even more. We across the country, Democrats stayed home. We didn't knock on doors. Instead of the recognition, like it's okay to knock on a door and then walk 6 feet away and still be able to have that conversation. But that's not what Democrats did. And that's not what Democrats did here in the state of Florida. And so when we got to a point in 2020, which is the largest presidential loss, I believe, that we had had in a very long time, 3 points. And again, 3 points in Florida at that time in 2020 was like a landslide in comparison to previous, Bush v. Gore, just, 20 years earlier, where it was a national recount and national Supreme Court cases in less than a couple hundred votes. So to know that in 20 years, this is where we got, you just saw a lot of the conversation, a lot of the rhetoric is maybe Florida has just become red and is no longer winnable. And so you saw a lot of that rhetoric really sticking and really understanding that this is a large state. I think we've got the 3 largest media buys expenses in the entire nation, the largest media. And so it is an expensive state. It is a diverse state. It is very complicated state. Even if you are in Miami, there's parts of Miami that are very different than other parts of Miami. And Miami is very different than Broward County, which is very different than Palm Beach, which is night and day to the Panhandle. And so you've got all these different pockets all over the state, and it's expensive. And so when you didn't have the internal party structure inside of Florida that were showing signs of life, that were showing new innovative ideas, and not just going back to the same consultants that keep losing for Florida Democrats time and time again. And if you weren't thinking of things outside the box and you kept repeating the same candidates and hoping that this time was going to be the right time, people gave up. People gave up on Florida and said, we have the ability to go and put our resources into other states like Georgia, like Michigan, like Ohio, like Pennsylvania, and be able to do a better job fighting back. And so, yes, in 2022, it was a complete collapse. Unfortunately, my predecessor, really wasn't able to rejuvenate the party, wasn't able to get a lot of buy-in. And so when you don't have buy-in from the people inside the state, and I say this all the time on my tour across the state, God helps those who help themselves. And so if we aren't able to show life here and show that we're doing something different, that there's a new plan here, not only are our Florida donors not giving, because they've been giving for 30 years and are tired, but the national donors say, well, Florida donors aren't giving and there's no new plan here. How can we invest? And so in 2020, you saw significantly less investments than you probably saw in 2016. And then in 2022, there was just nothing. And that's what we're having to deal with. And so this was really important, that one of the first things that I did out of the box and out of the gate of becoming chair is saying, okay, how can I make sure that people see that this is going to be different, that this is going to be a new Democratic Party of Florida, that we're worth investing in. And that arrest was one of them, showing that there's life again, that there's a fight here, and that we're not going to stand by and allow our state to be lost. And then we won Jacksonville, and showing again proof of concept of that Jacksonville race. And a lot of this was based on not just proof of concept in Jacksonville, but a whole new media strategy, of rapid response, of putting together toolkits, of unifying our messaging, of lifting up our electeds, of making sure that we are putting out, press statements every single day to make sure that there's a response to all of this insanity. Because unfortunately, the Republican Party and having the leadership in every single part of our agencies, that it's hard to break through. It's hard they have all the oxygen. They have the leadership roles in each of these agencies, that it's hard to stand up what Democrats are doing. But that's what we've been having to do. We've been having to really reinvigorate the party through our communication shop and showing the success. And so that's why now national Democrats are coming back to the table. They're seeing that they can't give up on Florida. Florida is too important of an electoral state. Too much messaging comes out of Florida that really impacts the rest of the conversation across the nation. And it is important that we control the message in Florida. And that is what we are doing every single day. And that's why we're starting to find the reinvestment, not only financially, but even in conversations of the national donors and national leaders.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like it's very challenging to get it back from the Republican Party, because it's like they've infiltrated like locally, like, and not just here in Florida, but like even down to school boards and such, like everywhere across the country. So, they've just gotten in on the inside and they have a stronghold, and it'll be interesting to see moving forward how we can get that back, because that's what gives, I think, a lot of the oxygen to DeSantis to be able to get away with a lot of the stuff that he has.
Yep. Yep. And I think that that's right. And that he no longer has to do all of the work himself. He's found those loyal soldiers, that whether it's the legislature, whether it is his commissioner of education, whether it is board of trustees at universities, whether it is school board members, whether it's his, removing of elected officers to put his own people in. So now he doesn't even have to do all the work. He's put these loyal soldiers in all of these pretty prominent positions and prominent roles that they're able to really change the narrative. And I say this all the time, and I think that the passing of Jimmy Buffett this past weekend really exemplifies what my message has been on this. Florida has always been a libertarian state. You want to hang out in Key West and listen to Bob Marley and Jimmy Buffett, like that's your prerogative. You want to go to Daytona 500 and be part of the race community, you did that. You want to go to Tampa and participate in Gasparilla and throw beads, or you want to go to Seaside up in the Panhandle, you found your people. You kind of found your community, you found your people, and everybody else left you alone. And that's even what Jimmy Buffett said, the island life, like the carefree, let's all like sing happy songs and enjoy each other and protect the environment and just, enjoy life. And unfortunately, DeSantis and his cronies have taken our state in such an extreme direction that that's not who Florida has ever been. It has never been this. And so I do believe that there's going to be a reckoning with DeSantis and his cult that has formed here in the state, that their reckoning is going to happen. It's going to happen first at the local level, where all of these legislators are having to go back to their districts, whether they're red or purple or blue. They're going to have to go back to their districts and have to say, this is why I voted for a 6-week abortion ban, even though that 75% of my district didn't agree with that. This is why I voted for a permitless carry in our state, even though that 71% of my district doesn't agree with it. And I went after, the LGBTQ community, where my community is like, we don't care, and so you're going to have a reckoning with these people who are having to go home. And you're seeing it. I think I saw a number yesterday that 68% of school board members that went on this woke train across the nation lost, because the people don't want this. They want to know that their teachers are qualified. They want to know that they're good people. They're getting paid well. Their kids are safe in school and they're getting a good education. They don't want this fighting. They don't want books banned. They don't want one parent to override their opinions. And that's what's happening. And you're going to find, as long as we as Democrats do our job in organizing, being rational, standing up for the issues that the everyday Floridians care about, you're going to see that pendulum swing back a lot faster, because this is not who we are as Floridians. And that is going to start to become even more relevant as Ron DeSantis implodes on the national stage, and people in Florida be like, oh, wait, he's really not that great. And you start seeing them even pull back from their support from him. Even as of today, he has dropped 19 points in Florida since the last legislative session, because, again, Floridians did not want what he just sold.
Exactly. This is not the land of extremism here. It never has been until now. So it's pretty frightening. So Ray, I'm actually going to turn it over to you because Ray had some questions. Speaking of some of the issues with the "Don't Say Gay" and all
Yeah.
of that. Go ahead, Ray.
Thank you so much, Avril. Appreciate it. Good morning, Nikki.
Ray.
Good. Let me introduce myself. I'm the chapter president here in Ohio. I represent the LGBTQIA plus community. I'm married. I'll be married for 8 years in December. I'm together with my husband for 10 years. And in Ohio, I'm sorry, in Florida, the Pulse nightclub, the second largest shooting in the United States, Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, Human Rights Campaign issuing their emergency declaration to the LGBTQ plus community, travel advisory not to go to the state of Florida, the countless reports of gender-based bullying in Florida. It seems that a lot of people in the LGBTQ community's perspective that the Democratic Party uses our community as a prop when it's convenient. Can you address these perspectives? And what exactly do you think the Florida Democratic Party can have in place or development to address that perspective?
That's interesting. I've actually never heard that perspective in Florida. And let me tell you why, because our LGBTQ plus community is an integral part of our party apparatus. It is part of who we are as a party. One of our largest caucuses here in our state. When I was Commissioner of Agriculture, in fact, I appointed the first ever LGBTQ advocate for the state of Florida. My first director is now at HRC. My second is now the chair of or president of the LGBTQ plus caucus, and the first trans leader in our state to hold a government position of that sort. And so it is, we are lockstep because it's about human decency, and it's about making sure that everybody feels safe in our state. And I tell this story all the time, and I have been one of the largest straight gay alliance members of my entire life. My stepbrother came out to me when I was 17 years old. He was 17, I was 16, and watched his fight throughout his entire life on acceptance. That would have been 1993, where I would have thought times would have changed, but unfortunately times have gotten worse in the last couple of years, especially here in the state of Florida. You know, where he calls me and says, "Nick, please figure this out because I'm scared. I want to get married and I'm scared to get married in Florida." And even through my time as student body president, created the first ever Pride Student Union cabinet position. And so this is something that I have never seen and I've never heard, and to be honest, in Florida, that this community is ever deemed as a pawn, because they have a complete seat at the table. And it is part of, you know, what we do here in Florida, and what the Democratic Party stands for is always standing up. And you saw during that last couple of legislative sessions where the attacks on the LGBTQ community were not even, it was just blatant. It wasn't even like they were trying to hide it. And the entire Democratic Party organized. We came up, we supported our colleagues in elected offices, and tried to fight back against this rhetoric, and tried to fight back against these pieces of legislation. So I don't know where, and maybe that's rhetoric in other parts of the country, but I have never heard it in Florida, because again, we have one of the largest LGBTQ plus communities in the country, and it is part of our leadership inside the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's not just Florida. It is nationwide issue. To be fair, just for clarity. So it's not just the state of Florida, it's Ohio, it's everywhere. But this was addressed with other representatives in the state of Florida, and they had actually mentioned it to us in conversation. So that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention to see what your perspective was. In regards to these dangers, as the Don't Say Gay bill and the Pulse shooting, what do you think the Democratic Party could do to address these dangers for our community, to make sure that they're safer for us to travel, to vacation, and enjoy the state.
Yeah, and we are. I mean, we are, every time that we're seeing legislation, we are standing up. In fact, last night, actually the last 24 hours, the HRC in Palm Beach County got one of the city commissions to pass a safety protection, like a safe space city. And so that was unanimously. And so we were able to stand up and applaud and to show what it's like to just have common decency, again, in the state of Florida. But unfortunately, in Miami-Dade, we also pushed out. Miami-Dade School Board last night had an opportunity to bring back up. They had previously, for 10 years, I believe, had October being Pride History Month in the school system, and last year they did not renew it, and it was up on the agenda yesterday. And the Democratic Party not only encouraged people to attend and to speak at the school board meeting, but we put out flyers, we put out social media, we put it on our newsletter, encouraging people. One of our I created a youth council here in the States. We got about 100 or so, 35 and unders. One of our members from the youth council was leading this charge and was testifying last night, and we showed support for him. And so these are the types of things that, as issues, and the same thing that in the center part of our state, one of our cities is also creating a safe zone, and the Republican legislators of that county and came in and threatened them. And we came out and had a statement on that, showing how inappropriate that is, and about small government, and how the Republicans have lost their way on big government versus small government. And so that's how the Democratic Party is continuing to engage, is that we are lifting up our leaders that are in this fight, but we're also showing support for the issues as they're coming across, whether it's school board or city commission meetings or in the legislature, that we will continue to fight back and continue to show that we are going to always stand up for communities who are being attacked and marginalized. And same thing as a member of the Jewish community, seeing the rise of anti-Semitism in our state, it is not even heartbreaking. It is infuriating that we have a governor who refuses to denounce Nazis. And the same thing, we had the shooting in Jacksonville over the weekend that was a racist. It was a white supremacist, and the fact that we have a governor who's unwilling to even call it that, and all of that, not denouncing white supremacists, not denouncing neo-Nazis, is fueling this hate in our state for all communities. And so it's important for the Democratic Party to consistently stand up for any attacks on any of our communities, because you attack one of us, you're attacking all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm 43 years old, so my concern is not just towards me. My concern is towards the youth of my community, because they have to grow in this more ever increasing, filled hate that is growing every single day, more and more and more, as you see Nazi flags, and I don't want to say it, but it seems like troops, going over bridges and, hailing signs and stuff like that you see on the news. And it's like mind-boggling that this is America. I've never seen this before in my time. This is the first time I'm seeing this happen. And I'm like, what exactly is going on? So that's where I'm coming from. It's not, whenever I get a chance to talk to a leader of a party or a state or something like that, I like to get their feedback on, the LGBTQ community and, this particular topic. But I thank you very, very much for this and your honesty. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Really, like I said, like this is personal to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, my cousin also came out to me a couple of years ago that she is also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. So this is now more family. And so this is something that we have to stand up against, because look, as a member again of the Jewish community, I studied, concentration camps was the end. but there are a lot of things happened in the front end. You know, the consolidation of power, the taking away of rights, the taking away of books, of the educational opportunities. These are things that led up to and teach hate and fear. And that is not how America is supposed to be. Yes, we have a troubled past, like no doubt about it. Like America has not been perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we learn from that to make us a better union and to know that we have to make sure that everybody has, it's not even about equal opportunity for success. It's not even talking about success. This is just talking about living and not be in fear of going, you know, to a restaurant or going to a school. And I'll tell you this one story. And then I saw Steve had his hand up. So, you know, this one story, a couple weeks ago, I was here in Tallahassee, and I was walking into a meeting with the new president of the AFL-CIO. And as I'm going across the parking lot, this is also move-in time for our colleges and our universities. There was a kid that was, you can easily see that he had boxes and was moving in, and his mom there. And he saw me walking across the parking lot, and he comes up, he goes, "Hey, are you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Can I hug you?" And I said, "Yeah." And gave me this big hug. And he says, "Thank you for what you are doing. In fact, just crazy that I just ran into you within the last 24 hours. I was having a conversation with my family because we just saw a story that came out that so many of our professors at Florida State University are leaving because of all of this that's happening in our state. And I didn't know if I should stay or if I should go outside of Florida for college." And he's like, "Maybe it is so appropriate that I'm running into you now when we're having literally that conversation." And I said, "Mom, why don't you come over and we have this conversation together?" And I said, "Look, I can't tell you to stay if you feel that your personal safety or your educational opportunities are diminished because of the policies, but stay and fight with us if you can, because I can't afford you leaving our state, because then we can never get it back." But these are the conversations that are happening every single day, and families across our state that are having to make these really tough decisions of whether to stay in Florida, raise their families here, especially those that are in the LGBTQ community.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being a great ally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Avril, do you mind if I step in?
Absolutely.
Good morning, Nikki,
Morning, Steve.
and you other guys too. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nikki, I'm an attorney. I'm a small town attorney. Been practicing over 40 years. I'm in the town I was raised in. That was gone for a long time, but came back. It's a town of about a little bit over 3,000. We're in the largest county in Oklahoma, Osage County, very large. There's no Democratic Party here anymore, and that's the case with many other counties in Oklahoma. There are so many races that there's no Dem running. I myself, at this point in time, I'm registered as an independent. I kind of swing over to a Republican. If there's a Republican primary, it's like, I got to vote in it. I can't not vote in it. And of course, if you're a Democrat, you can't vote in Republican primaries. If you're an independent here, you can vote in Democratic primaries. And so we've had elections on occasion where it's like, I got to register at least temporarily as a Republican to make my vote count. So we're in this situation, and I know that Oklahoma and Florida are different population-wise, but I also know that Florida has a lot of rural communities, especially, I would say, in the Panhandle. And I'm just curious what the state party down there, what you all are doing to bridge this urban-rural divide. Because here, I'm sure there also, it's really stark how the Democrats have just evaporated away so much in rural Oklahoma.
Yeah, and this is obviously a national conversation, and this is something that's happening across the country. And what I have said here in Florida, you have to have a 67 county strategy. Like, you have to, because unfortunately, like even in our suburban areas, you can't rack up the votes enough to be able to offset. We can't lose by 90% in our rural communities and think that we're going to win the state. And unfortunately, a lot of statewide and presidential campaigns, because our state's so large and because it's so expensive, they focus on just the blue areas, turning out the tri-county of South Florida, the I-4 corridor, which is Tampa, Orlando, blue Gainesville, blue Leon County, which is Tallahassee, and Jacksonville area, and they leave the rest of the state alone. And that has never been a winning equation here in our state. When I won in 2018, we knew we had to lose by less in some of those marginalized communities. And so we did. My first TV commercials were in red counties. That is where I spent a lot of my time is losing by less in some of those areas. And so as a party, I now get to take that ideology and take it to the party. We have a strategy. We just finished our statewide tour, which went to some of our rural communities, that we are working on revitalizing our local parties in those areas, making sure that we're trying to recruit candidates, that we're focusing on voter registration, not just in Democrats, but we have this huge uptick in the independents, the NPAs in our state, which is across the country. And we got to go focus on getting some of those people back. And as past commissioner of agriculture, I get to go into those communities and be able to say, look, for 4 years, I was your greatest advocate. You look through all the things that I did as commissioner of agriculture, you haven't seen somebody as active and supportive of Florida agriculture at the time when Republicans were doing everything they could to hurt Florida agriculture. I mean, Ron DeSantis doesn't understand anything about agriculture in the state of Florida, and never stood up for Florida ag in his now, not only 4 years as governor, but even his time as a member of Congress. And so we're able to go into these rural communities, which is our plan, is to go into the rural communities, have the honest conversation about what is on their minds. And because, look, at the end of the day, we're talking about what is happening in some of our rural communities. They don't have hospitals. Well, 30 years worth of Republican rule of our state, that's what led to that. 30 years, one party has controlled our state. You still don't have infrastructure and roads, but you're getting them. You know why? Because of the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden passed and the Democrats supported. You haven't had broadband. We're going to get broadband now because of Joe Biden. So some of the quality way of life that we're able to sell, and if they say, our number one issue is guns, great, I own a gun. I was your commissioner of agriculture. I oversaw the concealed weapons program. It was the most efficiently run department, that division in the history of the state of Florida. So we're able to make those arguments. But yes, the plan is absolutely 67 counties. In fact, earlier this morning, I was on the phone with one of my leadership in the Panhandle, talking about candidate recruitment. Where are we on certain things? I have revitalized my entire campaign committee. She is vice chair of it. And then a young woman who ran for Congress as well, but she's coming from a rural area. And so we are getting those leadership there. And it's not just a Florida thing. I mean, I'm having these deep conversations with a lot of the party chairs in the South. Anderson, who's the North Carolina party chair. She and I talk a lot about, rural communities and getting back to the basics, because look, we lost the Dixiecrats. Dixiecrats are gone. We got to go figure out how to get them back. And that's going to be hard conversations and doing the work on the ground. We can't just expect them to vote for us. They haven't been doing that. We got to go in, we got to have the conversations, and we got to find candidates from those communities that truly represent those communities too.
Well, you're really special. You're unique. I don't think we don't have anybody like you here in Oklahoma. We have some personalities that are similar. And Kevin, I'm thinking of Madison Horn, personality-wise here in Oklahoma. But for you to have been the Secretary of Agriculture, to be able to go to these communities and say, I'm one of you, that's something I don't think we really have here. But I think it's something we can search for. And that's why I was asking, because I'm really curious how that connection is made by you and your party there in Florida. And you're just an amazing asset. And I'm so happy that you're on this morning and have this opportunity to speak with you.
I appreciate that. And these are also conversations that I have with Jamie Harrison, is how to utilize people like me, people like Anderson, to go into our rural communities. Because to your point, that you don't have a lot of Secretary Vilsack. You don't have a lot that are really coming from our rural and agricultural communities to be able to go and talk about agriculture and the necessity. It's great that we're bringing manufacturing jobs back here to the United States, but we also have to make sure that agriculture and our farmers are also taken care of. And I've been saying this since I got in as commissioner, that if we don't protect our agriculture industry in our country, we're giving up national security. It's a national security threat if we are consistently relying on other countries to be importing our fruits and vegetables. We saw that during the pandemic, how we have to make sure that we're reinvigorating the rural parts of our country, and those that are part of feeding not just the nation, but the world. Florida agriculture feeds 150 million people across the United States. We export to 37 nations. That is important, and it's important for people that are not from agriculture or from rural communities to understand the impact that agriculture truly has on this nation.
Well, I'll stop here, Avril. Thanks for your indulgence. I was raised in the cattle business. I've got a brother who's actually a very strong Republican, but he goes down to Florida and he buys a lot of cattle there from the ranches. And so there's a lot of Florida cattle that end up here in Sept County, and you're certainly welcome to come up here.
I love it.
You're in Oklahoma. I hope you find an opportunity to come up here and be glad to show you around.
I would absolutely love that. Yeah, we are, which people don't know, Florida cattle is the second largest. Texas 1 and Florida is 2. So it's pretty remarkable. Agriculture is actually in Florida the second largest economic driver after tourism. It's a $1.3 billion industry. 2 million people work in agriculture in the state of Florida, and it's a pretty cool industry. It's the heart and soul of the state. Our license plate has the Florida orange on it. That as a Gator, Ben Hill Griffin, who is his family, is the name of our stadium, but they're the founding fathers of citrus industry in our state. So citrus and agriculture has been the lifeblood of our state, since, the indigenous were here and still are here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kind of keeping in that same vein a little bit with talking about the rural parts of Florida. I'm curious, since you're able to go visit these areas and talk with people there, can you pinpoint a couple of common misconceptions that people have about the Democratic Party there?
There's lots of misconceptions. There's a lot, and it's, one, I think, is that every Democrat wants to take people's guns. That's always and we did that to ourselves. Like, in the history of the Democrats, we did that to ourselves, and now we got to kind of overcompensate for that. But the conception that we want to take people's guns is one that's out there. 2, which is something that you may not hear as much in your neck of the woods, but the socialism, stuck down here, especially in South Florida. A huge misconception. I think that 95% of the people say, "Oh, they're all socialists," don't even know what the word socialist means. And so when I declared for governor, one of the first things that I said was "Yo soy capitalista." As a small business owner, as an attorney for 20 years, that you can't say that. But more importantly, I think, we as a Democratic Party didn't do a good enough job combating that and understanding why it's stuck and why it was such an emotional appeal to so many people, especially those in South Florida. And it's the recognition that those that are coming from Cuba, from Colombia, from Venezuela, they're leaving countries that they saw their governments put their opposition leaders in prison. They saw, taking away small businesses and taking that money for the government. They saw, people being shot and killed and imprisoned. And so they come here for a better quality way of life. And so that's how they think about the countries that they came from. And when they hear that there's a possibility that there's a party that is similar to that, it has an emotional appeal. And just by Democrats saying, "No, I'm not," is not the answer. And so being able to completely understand and be able to have that conversation, but it's stuck. And it's something that we still see. I think it is an overused, and it's not as prominent. You're not hearing it as much from the Republicans, because people are like, "What are you talking about? You're talking about removing people from office, and you're putting," what's actually happening on the ground is the Republicans that are banning books. It's the Republicans that are going after our teachers and our school board members and removing elected officials from office. It is the Republicans who are becoming big government and are overspending the resources. But that is probably, those 2 issues are probably the biggest misnomer that I hear. The socialist thing is in South Florida, and the guns is the rest of the state.
For sure. And it's the Republicans that try to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power. Has not been the Democratic Party. But I was just kind of curious if there is going to be a big push or initiative to kind of dispel that even more, like an educational like initiative, like maybe, I don't know, commercials or whatnot, that can kind of get into those communities and really explain the difference and put people's mind at ease.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of that, especially in South Florida. That there is, we are consistently. I've got this WhatsApp chat with probably about 30 Hispanic Democrats across the state, and so they're constantly looking for and hearing, whether it's radio commercials or it is, on the radio airwaves, what's being said, and they're getting it back to us, and then and then we're trying to push them to be on that same radio show and trying to really combat some of that. You saw President Biden just committed $25 million to Miami, to South Florida and Hispanic airwaves. Because that's the other thing too that Democrats haven't done, is not just that we allowed it to stick and we didn't have a combating message. We weren't even present. We weren't on the Spanish radio and the Spanish TVs, and we weren't in the Creole newspapers, and so we let them take that space. And so now it is incumbent upon us, as we're kind of going through all of this. And it's not just us, it's going to be a lot of our willing partners across the state and across the country that are understanding that if we don't fix the South Florida Hispanic messaging in Miami, how in the world are we going to be able to pull the Hispanic demographics back with us across the rest of the nation? And so we are all focusing on making sure that we're working on that. Whether there's TV commercials, quite honestly, TV commercials probably aren't the right path for that. It's interviews and conversations like this. It's probably even in digital ads and things of that nature. But there is definitely a very constructive effort, both from the national level, state level, local level, to make sure that we are consistently combating that rhetoric.
Excellent. Yeah, I personally think that that'll make a huge difference, just getting that point across, because just from someone who lives here, in the Orlando area, we are also very diverse, and we have, a big Cuban American population here and people from all over the Caribbean. And that's been kind of the biggest thing, when we do talk about political things, is that they're just afraid. They're afraid that Florida or the United States is going to turn into where their families fled from.
And there's a right emotion, like if you saw, you left at like 4 or 5 years old because your dad's small business was just shut down and you're seeing chaos in the street. Of course, and I think it's why Democrats failed, is because we failed to understand the emotional connection there. And we tried to out policy an answer. And that's not how you deal with this situation. This is an emotional situation. The same thing when I'm seeing that the swastikas all over our state, that's an emotional response that I have, and why it's so important that immediately I'm asking for DeSantis and for Republican leaders and for everybody to denounce Nazis, because if you don't do it immediately and understand the emotional reaction, and people and the Republicans like, oh, well, Ron, is a great supporter of Israel and he's sending all this money to Jewish day schools, and great. But the reason why Israel is so important to the Jewish community is because 6 million of us were killed in concentration camps. And you know how you protect Israel, how you protect the Jewish community? By denouncing Nazis. And if you're not willing to do that, and so that is why even on the socialist stuff, is you got to understand the emotional connection, that it's not enough to say, oh, I signed a piece of legislation. And I'm sorry, that's not going to solve this problem. You've got to have the emotional response that to coincide with the visuals and the reactions. And the same thing on the rhetoric on socialism. Got to understand the emotional reasons why the people are having that kind of reaction, and figure out how to dispel what their beliefs are of why we are not that.
Could I step in? Nikki, it's storm season down there. Of course, you all just had a hurricane, rake across your state, and it sure looked like Biden, stepped up and did what we know he does. He's just a wonderful leader to have in that position as president. And then I was curious, there's another storm, maybe this potentially is Hurricane Lee. They haven't said it's going to hit Florida yet. It sure looks like it's going to be a monster. I'm just curious about your perspectives in terms of the DeSantis Biden type of relationship or lack thereof, and whether that's going to have any kind of negative effects even on Floridians in terms of relief from these storms.
What is really amazing about President Biden is that he doesn't play petty. That is not who he is. He has a job to do. And so regardless of, I've had very intimate conversations with the president about Ron DeSantis when he was first running in 2020, and then his time when I was commissioner. And I know firsthand that nothing that Ron says or does or doesn't say or doesn't do is going to ever impact the federal government's response to any natural disaster, whether it is in Florida, whether it is in Texas, or any other red state. It is embarrassing that our governor has so little respect for the position of president, that he has, and I have counted this on numerous occasions, every time the president has been in our state, every time the vice president has been in our state, he has refused to meet them at the airport. Back when the vice president was here, first time she was here in 2021 as vice president, he refused to go. And so which was great for me because I got to go and welcome her into the state of Florida, into Jacksonville in 2021. But that's just the pettiness of Ron DeSantis. And unfortunately, it's showing a very bad morale for the people of our state, where you have to know, which is one of the things that I said consistently in 2019 when we had to be in the cabinet together. I said, this will be an opportunity to show the nation how two people from two different parties can work together for the betterment of their state. And that was what I said consistently in 2019. Granted, I've never been so wrong in my entire life, but that's just who Ron is. And so Floridians know how to get through storms at this point. There is a playbook. I lived through Hurricane Andrew in 1992 when there was no playbook. I was out of electricity for 6 weeks, started high school 6 weeks late. But things have changed, and we know how to respond to hurricanes. But it's unfortunate that DeSantis uses hurricanes as an opportunity to spin goodwill for himself, as opposed to the recognition of the work that needs to get done on the ground. Everything is about a game to him. How do we get the right people to be walking next to me for this next video so I can put it on and show people that I am a hero for the people of our state? But the Hurricane Lee has now, I think, become a Cat 5. I am closely monitoring this, but if this comes to not just Florida, but any shores, we're going to see massive, because it's a Cat 5 and it is far away from us. There isn't a Cat 6 yet category, but I would imagine that we might be getting into a territory where they may have to start reevaluating their cat numbers.
Well, I'm just hearing about this for the first time, that there's another hurricane out there, but I guess we're used to this here.
Coffee with Democrats does weather reports also. I guess you didn't know that.
Well, and what you will find out too, Steve, is that every Floridian is a meteorologist. Every Floridian, studies where exactly it's going to hit and predicts where it's going to hit. And well, if the winds go here and the waves go here, I mean, every Floridian has become, we get threatened by hurricanes every single year. And it seems like in the last 7 years, we get hit by at least one. And so this is something that we are used to. But unfortunately, to go on to the hurricane stuff too, we have an property insurance crisis that's happening in our state. Tremendous.
Right.
Tremendous. And this is failed leadership by the Republican Party. We've had 2 special sessions. We've gone through 5 legislative sessions during DeSantis's time. And the last thing that he just did was he just basically said, all right, insurance companies, what do you want? And gave the laundry list of everything that they have ever wanted, including preventing lawsuits when they don't cover complete damage. And so now we're seeing a situation where not only do consumers not have the right to go after their insurance companies, but now insurance companies said, well, that's great and all, but we're still not going to come. And so we are seeing now this mass exodus of insurance companies. The ones that are staying, their premiums since DeSantis became governor have increased 208%. With an anticipation of additional 40%. So while families are in the middle of hurricane season, they're struggling to even have found property insurance, to afford property insurance. They're getting out of all of their savings and to just pay for property insurance. And so when a hurricane is coming, you know that the aftermath you might not be able to afford. And the other problem is that we have a state-backed insurance company called Citizens, where if it's supposed to be the insurer of last resort, meaning if you can't find any other in the private marketplace, that number of policies should always be small because, again, insurance of last resort. But now we're sitting at 1.31 million citizens insurance policies that equate to about $530 billion worth of exposure to our state. So if this Cat 5 was to hit any of our populous areas, South Florida, Orlando, anywhere in the state, Jacksonville, not only would we be crippling our economy in our state, but we also, every single insurance policy holder, regardless if you're a Citizens policy holder or a private insurance policy holder, you would be having assessments to cover those. So not only are we seeing a 208% increase of premiums, but now you may have to spend more money to cover the Citizens policies that got hit in another part of the state. It is a disaster. It is the number one issue that every Floridian talks about. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, not registered to vote, if you are wealthy or if you're not. Everybody is talking about it. It is a major, major failure of the Republicans and Ron DeSantis. And then he had the complete audacity last week to say, well, I always wanted the legislature to do more. I'm sorry. The legislature does not move, does not pass things unless you have expressly asked them to do so or given them permission to do so. So for him to now pass the buck one more time to the legislature is just a complete malfeasance and dereliction of his responsibilities.
Well, he must be looking at some polls that indicate that this is not the hand that he really wants to be playing at this point in time. And so he's starting to do a little backpedaling, it sounds like.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of backpedaling on every issue. I mean, he knows that woke is not the thing that people across the country want to hear about. Even the Republicans are tired of it. And you see, and outside of like his policies, I mean, we can go for another hour and I can talk to you about all of his quirks and all of just his personality deficiencies. But that is really what I think most people at the end of the day, the more they get to know him, the more they are not liking him, because he is there's nothing here. You look at his eyes, if he ever makes eye contact with you, it's glazed over. There's just nothing there. He's just angry. He's bitter, vengeful, not somebody that you really want to as a president of the United States in comparison to Joe Biden, who, is the most compassionate, empathetic president that I think that we've had in a very long time. And DeSantis is just the polar opposite of that.
Well, we have really enjoyed this time with you. We have exceeded the hour, the 60 minutes that we promised that we would get off of here before, so that you could get back to your hard work of spreading the good work of the Democratic people in Florida. And Avril, I want to thank you for being the host today in running with this baton, because this has been a very good, very enlightening conversation with Chair Fried. It's such an honor to have you on with Coffee with Democrats. We want to be able to have you come back on again in the future, and I hope you enjoyed the time. One of the things that we wanted to be able to have a conversation with you about, maybe we can do it the next time, is start talking about some of the funny things that have taken place, because we've talked about so many serious things that that we can't go through life just talking about all the serious things without bringing light to some of the other things that life allows us to participate with. So we want to again thank you very much for coming on to Coffee with Democrats. Apologize for some of the technical issues, but we will make sure that this gets put onto live here this afternoon, and that we will make sure that this gets spread throughout all of our platforms. Again, thank you so much. It's so gracious. I mean, unbelievable that you would take the time out of your day to just have some coffee with us today.
Well, I certainly appreciate what you all are doing across the country, elevating Democratic voices and giving a different perspective of what we do every day, what we stand for, who we fight for, what we fight for. So truly appreciate the conversation. And you bet anytime that you want me back on to talk about the fun things in life, because there's a lot of good things that happen too out here. And like I did say, Jimmy Buffett is, I live the island life. I spent many of trips going down from Miami to Key West. I love this state, which is why I fight for it every single day. There's so many great people that live here. There's so many inspirational stories that you hear every single day, which is why we fight every day for the state. So thank you.
We love your passion. We really do. And so thank you so much for being on Coffee with Democrats. And for all the people who listen to Coffee with Democrats, we will be back on again next week. We've got a couple of opportunities next week. One of them is the Cindy Munson, who is the leader of the House for Democrats, the minority leader in Oklahoma. She's going to try to bring her entire caucus on to Coffee with Democrats and talk about some of the things that are going on within our state with Superintendent Ryan Walters, who is a real mess. But again, thank you for coming on, and we will be back on Coffee with Democrats next Thursday. And until then, everybody, thank you, and please be safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.